Welcome to Chapter 4, the institutionalization of business ethics. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to distinguish between voluntary and mandated boundaries of ethical conduct, provide specific mandated requirements for legal compliance in specific subject matter areas related to competition, consumers, and safety, specifically address the requirements of the Sarbanes-Oxley legislation and implementation by the Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as the SEC. Describe the passage of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act along with some of its major provisions. Provide an overview of regulatory efforts that provide incentives for ethical behavior. Provide an overview of the recommendations and incentives for developing an ethical corporate culture contained in the FSGO, which is the Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organizations. Provide an overview of highly appropriate core practices and their relationship to social responsibility. When we talk about voluntary boundary, core practices, and mandated boundaries of ethical decisions, Table 4.1 in your textbook breaks these three down for you. So voluntary boundary is something that's management initiated, and it's about a code of conduct where you look at the beliefs and values and any kind of voluntary policies and contractual obligations that you have. It's everything that is just given freely. It's something that you initiate on your own. You're putting everything out. You're exploring all the possible ways in which you can create an environment and establish these core concepts and principles that you want as your guiding and light, as a sense. And so we all have to have. We all talk about our personal boundaries, and there are some that we create ourselves, and there's some that are forced upon us, and these are the ones that you are creating yourself. We have a mandated boundary that is imposed on us. It's the laws of the local, city, state, county, federal, international, right? We have some laws and rules and regulations and other requirements that are imposed on us. Our core practice is the highly appropriate and common practice that helps to ensure that we are compliant with all legal requirements, any industry self-regulation, and any expectations society places upon us. The figure 4.1 shows you the elements of an ethical culture. Right at the center is your culture. That outer layer in orange are your values, the artifacts, and behavior and norms. And then that outer blue layer is the core practices and legal compliance, governance, and voluntary actions. And so you can see how it evolves and what it all encompasses. When we look at what's mandated for legal compliance, is any practice that does not reduce competition or harm consumers or society is permitted. When you reduce competition, you then form a monopoly. When you do that, it makes it difficult for others to get into the marketplace. It also limits and restricts access for consumers, because if I can't go to anyone else but you, and your prices are high or you're unethical or whatever, I am then stuck with either taking your service or product or not. A practice that harms consumers or society, that's kind of a given. So, right, we don't really want companies that can harm consumers or society. We do have companies that do, through waste and the products that they produce and things of that nature, and society is banding together to force those companies to comply, right? Where we talked about our societal influence, to comply with our demands, that they are not going to continue to harm us or future generations. There's different categories of law that we are obligated to follow. Civil law defines the rights and duties of individuals and organizations, and then our criminal law prohibits specific actions, and it imposes fines or imprisonment as a form of punishment if we happen to break the law. We can break things down using a regulation of competition, our protection of consumers, how we go about promoting equity and safety, protecting the natural environment in which we all live in, and how we can incentivize people to be compliant and to create these programs to help deter misconduct. These are several of the laws that regulate competition. You see, they go back to 1890 with the Sherman Antitrust Act. We have the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914, Consumer Goods Pricing Act of 1975, the Antitrust Improvements Act of 76, Foreign Corrupt Acts of 77. We have the Trademark Counterfeiting Act of 1980, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 98, Fraud Enforcement and Recovery Act of 2009, and understanding that some of these acts have evolved and been brought up to current standards and consideration of new factors and technology and different things that are taking place. And so to make sure that people aren't finding loopholes in previous regulations and laws, that we're always staying on top of them. In 1906, we had a Pure Food and Drug Act. In 68, we had a Truth in Lending Act. The Consumer Leasing Act of 76, the Do Not Call Implementation Act that was enforced in 2003, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998, then the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010. You can see all of the different ones, and like I said, we keep revising to make sure that people are not finding loopholes so that they can break the law, or actually not even break the law, because if they find a loophole that was applicable in 76 but not applicable in 2020, then they're like, well, I didn't break the law because this, and this is not relevant anymore. So we're having to consistently make sure that we're staying on top of these laws to make sure that we are protected. We have a Age Discrimination Act, an Employment Act of 67, which of course you see the Age Discrimination Act of 75. We have Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 78 that we had to roll out, Civil Rights Act of 1991. So we talked about Sarbanes-Oxley Act in previous chapters, but we can go into greater depth here. It was passed to establish a system of federal oversight of corporate accounting practices. And of course, this was spawned because of the huge ball that was dropped where, as I shared in chapter 1, when we looked at the various stages, we have a understanding that we have the Reagan-Bush era, and from that era, it was more of an embracing of business. Well, we then roll into the Bush administration, and there is a push to deregulate the financial services and Wall Street, and let us regulate ourselves, because who else can regulate us better than ourselves? Well, really, that's not the best way. And when Clinton was in office, he actually had put someone in position who had given the opportunity to pass a lot of the acts and laws that were presented, would have helped potentially prevent the financial crisis that we experienced in the mid-2000s, right, around 2008 or so. And so then this Sarbanes-Oxley Act is implemented to help make sure that these accounting firms and the various financial services, Wall Street, are actually not in a position to mislead as they had in the past. There was a lot of issues where things were not transparent and honest, and a lot of numbers that were incorrectly calculated, and it was just a lot of just criminal acts, unethical, that impacted consumers, investors, the country as a whole, because, you know, as these companies are failing and they've got hundreds of thousands of employees, the same token, we end up having to do some bailouts, because it would have just totally crippled our economy in so many ways. So with this, we've created a public company accounting oversight board that monitors accounting firms that audit public corporations, because what we're realizing is that some of these public corporations are, you know, if you're trying to look profitable because you're trying to make certain strategic moves where your profit levels can help garner the position that you need, sometimes could possibly get an accounting firm to turn the other way to overlook something. Well, these oversight boards are on them like hawks to monitor them. And recently, we've had an accounting firm, along with a public corporation, have to take responsibility and pay huge fines because of clear and blatant oversight. So that is something that is been very beneficial. You have the Jobs Act, which is the Jumpstart Our Business startups, which exempts emerging growth companies from observing the auditor attestation requirements from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And you'll read more about that in Chapter 4. We look at the independence of the auditor and the analyst, and Section 201 of the Act prohibits registered public accounting firms from providing both non-audit and audit services to a public company. They have to do one or the other. It also guarantees protection of whistleblowers, so it motivates employees to disclose information in judicial proceedings against a private employer. And it also makes sure that their compliance costs have reduced. Because of that, compliance costs have reduced over the years. With the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, there are various provisions that are put in place. And in Chapter 3, I discussed that one of those provisions has currently been under attack for the past 3 to 4 years. That is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that was put in place to help protect us as consumers from predatory lenders, from predatory practices, from being misled. And interesting enough, when you educate the masses, you can find yourself under attack from large corporate interests who benefit from the masses being ignorant. And so CFPB has been under attack by some giants who really don't want the consumer to be as enlightened, educated, and as empowered as we are becoming. Sad. Some other provisions are the Office of Financial Research and FSOC, which is the Financial Stability Oversight Council. All of these were created as new financial agencies through this act. And then, of course, the Dodd-Frank Act helped to institute a whistleblower bounty program. Once again, giving greater protection and giving people the freedom from recourse for, telling the truth and reporting unethical acts and practices. There's the FSGO, which is the Federal Sentencing Guidelines for Organizations. We mentioned the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Dodd-Frank Act. The goal is to require employees to report observed misconduct, and these are the various laws that help to encourage that conduct. We've gone through years of, snitches get stitches. Okay, that is something that has caused irreparable harm to employees, to consumers, to the country, to the world, because the misconduct is not just minor, it is major infractions that, caused and cost lives and money, tons of it. And so to put these in line will help us to be more transparent. As I mentioned in chapter 3, those 3 foundational principles of being of integrity, honesty, and fairness. And it's all rooted in our conduct. So here are some of the guidelines that organizations must align to and with is the development of a code of conduct that communicates required standards. Those in high positions should have an oversight over the program. Individuals with potential for misconduct should not be put in a position of authority, period. There should be a clear communication system that is established for disseminating standards and procedures to all employees. And the employees should be able to report misconduct without retaliation of any sort. When there's misconduct detected, the organization should take stern, immediate action. The organization must prevent similar offenses in the future after a case has been discovered. When we look at our core or best practices, it's the focus on developing structurally sound practices within our organization that is focused on integrity for both financial and non-financial performance measures. And there should be some voluntary responsibilities, and our marketing should be cause-related, and our philanthropy should be strategic, and there should be a focus on social entrepreneurship. Institutionalization helps to implant norms and artifacts and values in organizations, society, and industries. And the failure to understand the core practices of it provides the opportunity for unethical conduct to just explode and spread like disease. And the institutionalization of business ethics has advanced rapidly in the last 15 years or so as stakeholders recognize the need to improve business ethics. And actually, it's less than 15, but I'm being nice. I'm being nice. So with that, that is the end of this lecture. Please dig deep into chapter 4. Is not this presentation is not all encompassing, right? It's just giving you the some core concepts to focus on. And also the areas in which can be sometimes a little tedious to understand. If you have any questions or need me to go in greater depth to of something specific, of a concept or something that I may have maybe glossed over in this presentation, please send me an email. Thank you.